The massive ship appeared without warning near Earth's moon. It was larger than anything humanity had ever built, a vessel of dark metal and glowing lights that stretched for nearly 10 kilometers. Scientists around the world pointed their telescopes at it. Military officers scrambled to their stations. News networks interrupted their regular programs to show the strange craft hovering in the void of space. The year was 2347, and humanity had spread to 3 star systems. They had colonies on Mars, mining stations in the asteroid belt, and research outposts around the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. But they had never encountered alien life. They had searched for centuries, sending probes to distant stars and listening for signals from the cosmos. The universe had always remained silent until now. The ship broadcast a message on every frequency. It came in perfect English, perfect Mandarin, perfect Spanish, and a dozen other languages. The translation technology alone proved how advanced these visitors were. "People of Earth," the message said, "we are the Vexery Dominion, rulers of the Galactic Empire. We control over 2,000 worlds across this galaxy. Your existence has been noted. You will receive our ambassador within 1 standard rotation." President Daniel Ortega watched the message from his office in Geneva. He was a tall man with gray hair and calloused hands, a former asteroid miner who had worked his way into politics through the labor unions. He had seen many things in his 63 years of life, but nothing like this. "Get me Admiral Morrison," he said to his aide, "and call an emergency session of the United Earth Council." Admiral Katie Morrison received the call aboard her flagship, the Resolute. She was 51 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion 15 years ago, when the colonies demanded independence. She had lost friends in that war. She had learned hard lessons about what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. She ordered her fleet to take defensive positions, but made no aggressive moves. She wanted to see what these aliens would do the next day. A smaller craft detached from the massive ship and descended toward Geneva. It landed in the plaza outside the United Nations building, where President Ortega and the Council waited. When the doors opened, Ambassador Zethkura emerged. The alien was tall and thin, with 4 arms and large compound eyes. Iridescent wings folded against its back, shimmering in the afternoon sunlight. It walked with the careful steps of a creature unused to Earth's gravity. "President Ortega," Zethkura said. Its voice was smooth and cold. "I bring greetings from the Vexery Dominion." "Welcome to Earth," Ortega replied. "We have many questions about your people and your empire." "Questions are unnecessary," the ambassador said. "I am here to deliver terms, not to negotiate." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Morrison watched through a video feed from orbit, her jaw tight. Zethkura produced a small device that projected holographic text into the air. "These are the requirements for your integration into the Galactic Empire. First, you will surrender all military vessels and weapons to Imperial control. Second, you will pay tribute in rare minerals and resources, the amounts specified in this document. Third, you will accept permanent observer status in the Imperial Senate, with no voting rights for a minimum of 1,000 standard years."
The chamber fell silent.
President Ortega read through the projected terms, his expression unchanged. "And if we refuse?" he asked. Zethkura's wings fluttered, a gesture the humans would later learn indicated amusement. "No species has refused in 800 years. Those who tried were destroyed. Your primitive technology poses no threat to our plasma lances and shield systems. Your chemical rockets and nuclear weapons are relics of a lesser age." "I see," Ortega said. "And how long do we have to consider these terms?" 30 standard rotations. More than sufficient for a species of your development level." The ambassador's compound eyes seemed to glitter with contempt. "We have conquered races far more advanced than yours. The Kethri had faster-than-light travel when we found them. The DeLoreans had built orbital habitats spanning entire star systems. They all knelt before the Dominion. You will do the same." Ortega nodded slowly. "We will discuss your offer and provide our response within the allotted time." Zethkura seemed surprised by the calm reaction but said nothing more. The ambassador returned to its shuttle and departed, leaving behind only the holographic document and a lingering sense of threat. When the alien vessel had rejoined the massive ship, Ortega turned to his council. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some members demanded immediate surrender, terrified of annihilation. Others called for defiance, regardless of the consequences. The debate grew heated, voices rising and falling like waves against a shore. Ortega raised his hand, and the chamber fell quiet. "Admiral Morrison," he said, activating the communication link to her ship. "What is your assessment?" Morrison's face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, almost relaxed. "Mr. President, the ambassador made several assumptions about our capabilities. All of them were wrong. Explain." "They think we use chemical rockets because that's what our commercial fleet uses. They don't know about Project Titan. They don't know about the gravity drives or the kinetic accelerators. They don't know what we've built in the classified facilities on the outer moons." Morrison smiled slightly. "They looked at our public technology and decided we were primitives. That was their first mistake. And their second mistake?" Ortega asked. "They forgot what we are. Humans evolved on a death world, Mr. President. High gravity compared to most inhabited planets. A toxic oxygen atmosphere that would kill half the species in the galaxy. Temperature extremes that swing from boiling to freezing. Predators on every continent. Diseases that could wipe out entire populations." Morrison leaned forward. "Every species they conquered came from gentle worlds with stable climates and abundant resources. We came from a planet that tried to kill us every single day of our existence. And we survived. We thrived. We conquered our world and spread to the stars." The council members listened in silence. Some of them had never thought about Earth this way before. They had always seen their home planet as beautiful, as precious. They had never considered that, by galactic standards, it was a nightmare. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" Ortega asked. "I'm suggesting that we show these Vexari what Deathworlders are capable of. Let them bring their fleets. Let them bring their plasma lances and their 1,000 years of conquest. We've been fighting for survival since we were single-celled organisms in a boiling ocean. This is just another predator trying to hunt us." Morrison's eyes were cold. "And we know how to deal with predators." President Ortega looked around the chamber. He saw fear in some faces, determination in others. He thought about his years in the asteroid belt, working in conditions that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. He thought about all the challenges humanity had overcome, all the obstacles they had conquered. He smiled. "I think, Admiral, that we should let our visitors know exactly who they're dealing with." Not in argument this time, but in dark, knowing laughter. The sound echoed off the walls and carried into the night, where stars watched with ancient, indifferent light. 30 days would pass, and then the galaxy would learn why you should never threaten a Deathworlder. News of the ultimatum to Earth spread across the galactic empire within hours. The Vexari communication networks carried the story to every corner of their vast domain, from the frozen mining colonies of the Outer Rim to the pleasure palaces of the core worlds. Everyone was talking about the strange new species called humans on the agricultural world of Thesan Prime. A young Kethri scholar named Myra heard the news while working in the grain fields. The Kethri were a gentle people, with soft gray fur and large dark eyes. They had been conquered by the Vexari 3 centuries ago. Since then, they had served as farmers and laborers for the Empire. Their own culture had been suppressed, their leaders executed. Their children taught that resistance was impossible. Myra was different from most of her people. She had secretly learned to read the old texts, the ones the Vexari had tried to destroy. She knew that her ancestors had once been warriors and explorers. She knew that they had fought against the Empire for nearly 50 years, before finally being crushed. Now she listened. To the Imperial officers laughing in the Overseer's station. "Nearby, these humans are apparently from a death world," one officer said. He was a Vexari, with scarred wings, a veteran of many conquests. "High gravity, extreme temperatures, predators everywhere. They should have died out millennia ago. Makes them dangerous," another officer admitted. He was younger, his wings still bright and unscarred. "I heard they eat other animals. They're predators themselves. The scarred officer made a dismissive gesture. It doesn't matter. They're still primitives. Their fastest ships take years to travel between stars. One battle group will be more than enough to crush them. Mira felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten, a feeling her people had been taught to suppress. It was hope. She returned to her work, but her mind was far away. She began to wonder what these humans were really like. She began to imagine what might happen if the Empire was wrong about them. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. On the water world of Delore, where the aquatic Delorians lived in vast underwater cities, elders whispered about the new species that had refused to show fear. On the mining asteroids, where the silicon-based Kreth labored endlessly, workers shared rumors about Deathworlders who had laughed at Imperial threats. Everywhere, the conquered peoples of the Empire watched and waited on Earth. The 30 days were not spent in debate or panic. They were spent in preparation. Admiral Morrison moved her fleet into position around the solar system. She had 27 warships under her direct command, each one equipped with technology that the Empire knew nothing about. The gravity drives allowed them to move without visible propulsion, appearing to drift silently through space. The kinetic accelerators could fire projectiles at nearly 3% of the speed of light. The adaptive hull plating could shift its composition to absorb or deflect. Different types of energy weapons. Captain Lucas Webb commanded the stealth destroyer Silent Thunder. He was a quiet man in his 40s, with steady hands and a calm voice. He had spent his entire career in the classified divisions of the Earth Defense Force, testing weapons that officially did not exist. The Empire thinks we use chemical rockets, Webb said during a briefing with Admiral Morrison. They've observed our commercial fleet and assumed that represents our full capabilities. They saw what we wanted them to see, Morrison replied. Humanity has been hiding its true technology for over a century, ever since we realized that first contact might not be friendly. Do you think we can win? Morrison considered the question. Win. Against one battle group? Absolutely. Against the entire Empire? That depends on factors we can't control. Oh. She paused. But I'd rather die fighting than live as a slave. Webb nodded. He felt the same way. Every human did. The days passed quickly. Scientists ran final tests on weapon systems. Soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat simulations. Engineers checked and rechecked every ship in the fleet. The whole planet buzzed with quiet, determined activity. On the 30th day, Ambassador Zethkura's shuttle returned to Geneva. The aliens seemed pleased, confident that the humans had used their time to accept the inevitable. It strode into the council chamber with the casual arrogance of a predator visiting prey that had already surrendered. President Ortega was waiting. He wore a simple gray suit, his expression calm and unreadable. Ambassador, he said, thank you for returning. Have the surrender documents prepared? Zethkura asked. Its wings fluttered with anticipation. I'm afraid not. Ortega's voice was steady. After careful consideration, the United Earth Council has decided to decline your offer. Its compound eyes seemed to flicker with confusion. Decline? You cannot decline. No species has ever declined. Then we will be the first. You don't understand, the ambassador said. Refusal means destruction. The first battle group will reduce your cities to ash. Your colonies will be bombarded from orbit. Your people will be scattered and enslaved. We understand perfectly, Ortega replied. We simply don't care. Zethkura's wings spread wide, a gesture of threat and dominance. You are primitives. Your weapons cannot harm our shields. Your ships cannot match our speed. Ortega leaned forward. His voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber. Ambassador, we have been fighting for survival since we were single-celled organisms in a boiling ocean. We have survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and mass extinctions. We have killed every predator that tried to hunt us. We have tamed a world that wanted us dead, he smiled. Your threats don't frighten us. They annoy us. And you really shouldn't annoy Deathworlders. The ambassador stood in stunned silence. You have our answer, Ortega continued. Now I suggest you return to your ship and inform your superiors. The people of Earth will not kneel. Not today. Not ever. Zethkara turned and left without another word. Its wings were trembling, though, whether from rage or something else. The humans could not tell. When the shuttle had departed, Ortega opened a channel to Admiral Morrison. "They'll be coming soon." "We're ready," Morrison said. "The Silent Thunder is in position near the jump point. The rest of the fleet is hidden in Jupiter's radiation shadow." "Good luck, Admiral." "We don't need luck, Mr. President." Morrison's voice was hard as iron. "We're humans. We make our own luck." The Imperial First Battle Group arrived 2 days later. 40 warships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons charging. Their commanders certain of victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them, Commander. Vertex stood on the bridge of the dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, watching the human solar system grow larger on his display screens. He was an old Vexery, his wings scarred from a dozen campaigns. His exoskeleton marked by the ceremonial patterns of a high-ranking officer. He had personally conquered 12 worlds for the Empire. He expected this conquest to be his easiest yet. 40 warships flew in perfect formation behind his flagship. Each one bristled with plasma lances and torpedo tubes. Each one carried hundreds of soldiers trained in planetary assault. The humans had nothing that could stand against such force. "Commander, we're entering the outer system," his sensor officer reported. "No signs of enemy vessels?" "They're probably hiding behind their little moon," Vertex said with contempt. "Send the Blade of Morning and the Stellar Fang ahead to scout. I want to know exactly where their fleet is positioned." The 2 scout ships accelerated away from the main formation. They were fast vessels, designed for reconnaissance and light combat. Their crews were young and eager to prove themselves. Vertex waited for their reports. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. "Commander, we've lost contact with the Blade of Morning." Vertex turned sharply. "What do you mean lost contact?" "Their signal just ... stopped. No distress call, no warning. They simply went silent." "And the Stellar Fang?" The sensor officer's wings trembled. "Also, silent, Commander." A cold feeling crept through Vertex's body. In all his years of service, he had never lost a ship without knowing why. Ships didn't just vanish. Ships fought or fled or surrendered. They didn't simply cease to exist. "Send the Crimson Talon to investigate," he ordered. "Full combat alert." The Crimson Talon moved forward cautiously, its shields raised and weapons ready. Its captain was a veteran who had survived the DeLorean uprising. He knew how to handle surprises. He was not prepared for what happened next. A human ship appeared directly in front of him, materializing from empty space as if it had been invisible. It was small, perhaps a tenth the size of his cruiser. It should have been insignificant. The human ship fired once. The Crimson Talon's shields, designed to withstand plasma lances and energy weapons, offered no resistance to the kinetic round. The projectile, a simple piece of metal accelerated to 3% of light speed, passed through the shields as if they weren't there. It struck the cruiser's reactor core. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, back on the Eternal Dominion. Vertex watched in horror as another of his ships died. 3 vessels lost in minutes, and he hadn't even seen the enemy clearly. His sensor officer was shouting about impossible readings, about ships that appeared and disappeared, about weapons that defied all known physics. "Commander," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through." A human face appeared on the screen. Male, middle-aged, with calm eyes and a slight smile. "This is Captain Lucas Webb of the Earth vessel Silent Thunder. You have 30 seconds to reverse course. This is your only warning." Vertex, fear transformed into rage. "One ship dares to threaten the first battle group. All vessels, target that craft. Fire everything." 40 warships turned their weapons toward the Silent Thunder. Plasma lances charged to full power. Torpedo bays opened. The combined firepower of the battle group could have cracked a small moon. The Silent Thunder fired again. The kinetic round crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second. It struck the Eternal Dominion exactly where Captain Webb had aimed. penetrating the dreadnoughts. Primary shield generator and continuing through 3 decks. Before hitting the main reactor commander, Vertek had one moment of terrible clarity before the explosion consumed him. In that moment, he understood that everything the Empire believed about humans was wrong. They weren't primitives. They weren't harmless. They were the most dangerous thing the Vexery had ever encountered. Then, the Eternal. Dominion ceased to exist. Admiral Morrison's fleet emerged from behind Jupiter's moons like wolves, appearing from a forest. 27 human warships, their adaptive hull plating shifting to combat configuration, their weapon systems fully charged. They moved in perfect coordination, each captain knowing exactly what to do. The Imperial fleet, now leaderless and terrified, fell into chaos. Some ships tried to fight, firing their plasma lances at the approaching humans. The adaptive plating absorbed the energy, glowing briefly before redistributing the heat. Other ships tried to flee, but the human vessels were faster, their gravity drives pushing them to speeds that Imperial engines couldn't match. Captain Webb brought the Silent Thunder alongside a damaged cruiser and broadcast a simple message: surrender, and you will be treated fairly. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Some ships surrendered. Most didn't. They had been taught that the Vexery never lost, that the Empire was invincible. They couldn't accept what they were seeing. The Battle of Seoul, as it would come to be called, lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 39 Imperial vessels were either destroyed or captured. Only one damaged cruiser escaped, limping away at emergency speed to carry the terrible news back to the Empire. Admiral Morrison surveyed the debris field from her bridge. She felt no joy, no satisfaction. She had killed thousands of beings who had simply been following orders. Their blood was on her hands, and it would remain there forever. "Ma'am," her communications officer said. "President Ortega is calling. Put him through." Ortega's face appeared, lined with exhaustion. "Admiral, I've received the battle reports. Congratulations." "Don't congratulate me, Mr. President. This was just the beginning." Morrison looked at the stars beyond her viewport. One battle group was easy. The Empire has thousands of ships. When they understand what happened here, they'll send everything they have. Can we win? Morrison considered the question carefully. Against their fleets? Probably. But winning battles isn't the same as winning wars. We need allies. We need the other species in the Empire to see that resistance is possible. Ortega nodded slowly. Then we'll show them. We'll take the fight to the Empire's territory. We'll free the slaves and arm the oppressed. It will be costly. Mr. President, many humans will die. Many humans have already died. Throughout our history, fighting for freedom and survival, Ortega's voice was firm. This is what we are. This is what we've always been. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We fight until we win or until we can't fight anymore. Morrison smiled, a thin expression that held no warmth. Then let's get started. The galaxy needs to know that the Deathworlders are coming. Across human space, the fleets prepared for war. Shipyards worked around the clock, building new vessels. Soldiers trained in every climate and condition. Scientists developed new weapons and new defenses. The Empire had awakened something it couldn't understand, and now that thing was coming for them. The damaged cruiser reached the Imperial capital 3 weeks after the Battle of Seoul. Its captain, a young Vexery named Kethfer, was the only surviving officer from the first battle group. He delivered his report to High Chancellor Vexamon in the Great Throne Room. Surrounded by advisors and generals who listened in stunned silence. 40 ships, Kethfer said, his voice hollow with shock. 40 ships destroyed in minutes. Their weapons passed through our shields like they weren't there. Their ships appeared and disappeared at will. We couldn't track them, couldn't hit them, couldn't escape them. He shook his head. It wasn't a battle, High Chancellor. It was a slaughter. High Chancellor Vexamon sat on his throne of carved crystal, his ancient wings folded against his back. He had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. He had seen rebellions crushed and empires absorbed. He had never heard anything like this. "You are mistaken," he said flatly. "One primitive species cannot defeat our finest battle group. I saw it with my own eyes, High Chancellor. I watched the Eternal Dominion explode. I watched Commander Vertek die, the advisors muttered among themselves. Generals exchanged worried glances. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Empire was invincible. The Empire always won. Vexamin raised one of his forearms for silence. Send the 3rd and 5th fleets to the human systems. 800 warships. That should be sufficient to crush these primitives and avenge our fallen warriors. High Chancellor, one of the generals said carefully, perhaps we should gather more intelligence first. Learn about their weapons and tactics before we engage them again. Are you suggesting we show fear to a species we have never even heard of until recently? Vexamon's voice was ice. The Dominion does not hesitate. The Dominion does not negotiate. Send the fleets. The orders went out. 800 warships began assembling for the journey to Earth. It would take them several weeks to reach their target. Traveling through the hyperspace lanes that connected the Empire's vast territories. But Admiral Morrison wasn't planning to wait. 3 weeks after the Battle of Seoul, the human fleet appeared at Nexus Station. It was the Empire's forward staging base, a massive orbital platform housing 500,000 troops and 300 warships. No enemy had ever attacked it. No enemy had ever come close. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the station. Admiral Morrison broadcast a simple message. Surrender the station, and your lives will be spared. You have 5 minutes to decide, Station Commander. A Vexari admiral named Dexera laughed at the demand. She had 300 warships at her command. The humans had barely 30. The math was simple. Now vessels, she ordered, destroy the human fleet. The Imperial ships moved to attack, their formations practiced and precise. They had trained for centuries in fleet combat. They knew exactly what to do. What they didn't know was that human Marines were already aboard the station, while the fleets engaged outside. Dropships had slipped past the station's defenses, their stealth systems making them invisible to sensors. Now, hundreds of human soldiers were fighting their way through the station's corridors, overwhelming the security forces with brutal efficiency. Sergeant Major Christina Vance led the assault on the command center. She was a tall woman with short red hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. Before joining the military, she had worked as a survival instructor in the Australian outback, teaching people how to live in one of Earth's harshest environments. She had once killed a Martian sandbear with only a combat knife when her rifle jammed during a colony patrol. The Vexari guards were not prepared for her. Humans, they discovered, were stronger than most species. Earth's higher gravity had given them dense muscles and heavy bones. Humans were also faster, their reflexes honed by millions of years of predator-prey evolution. And humans were utterly fearless, charging into danger with a ferocity that seemed almost insane. These things are monsters. A Vexari soldier screamed into his communicator as Vance's squad broke through the final barricade. The command center fell in minutes. Admiral Dexera found herself staring at a human rifle barrel, her wings pressed flat against her back in submission. Order your ships to stand down, Vance said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. Do it now, and no one else needs to die. Dexera hesitated. A lifetime of Imperial conditioning told her to resist, to die fighting. But she looked at the human standing before her. This creature from a death world who had just conquered her station with a fraction of the expected forces. And something inside her broke. She gave the order. Outside, the Imperial fleet stopped firing. One by one, the warships lowered their shields and surrendered. It was the first mass surrender in Imperial history, and news of it spread faster than light itself. On Thesan Prime, Mira heard the reports and felt tears running down her furred face. The humans had done it. They had proven that the Empire could be beaten. They had shown that resistance was possible. She gathered her closest friends that night. Meeting in secret in an old grain storage building. The time has come, she said. We need to rise up. We need to fight for our freedom, but how? One of her friends asked. We have no weapons. No ships. No training. We have our numbers, Mira replied. There are millions of Kethri on this world, and only a few thousand Imperial soldiers. If we all rise at once, they can't stop us. Similar conversations were happening across the Empire. On Delore, the aquatic DeLoreans began sabotaging the underwater mining equipment that extracted resources for Imperial war production. On the mining asteroids, the Kreth workers simply stopped working, their silicon bodies standing motionless in silent protest. High Chancellor, Vexamon received reports of unrest from a dozen sectors. His advisors urged caution, suggesting that perhaps the Empire should focus on internal stability before continuing the war against the humans. He ignored them all. "Send every available fleet to the human systems," he commanded. 4,000 warships. We will crush these Deathworlders, and then we will punish every species that dared to defy us. The order went out. The largest fleet in Imperial history began to assemble. It would take months to gather all the ships, but when it was ready, nothing would be able to stand against it. Or so the High Chancellor believed, on Thesan Prime. Mira led her people in an assault on the planetary shield generators. It was a desperate attack, poorly armed Kethri against trained Imperial soldiers. Many died, but in the end, the shields fell, and when human ships arrived 2 days later, they found a planet that had already freed itself. Captain Ina Santos was the first human to set foot on Thesan Prime. She was met by Mira, who looked exhausted but triumphant. "We heard you needed allies," Myra said. "The Empire has made many enemies. They just needed someone to show them that fighting back was possible." Santos looked at the gathered Kethri, thousands of them filling the streets of the capital city. They were cheering, crying, embracing each other. For the first time in 3 centuries, they W. Air free. "Welcome to the war," Santos said, extending her hand. "I think this is the beginning of something special." Myra took the hand and shook it firmly. "Show us how to fight," she said. "Show us how to be warriors again. And together, we will tear this empire down." 1 year had passed since the ultimatum. 1 year since Ambassador Zethkara had demanded humanity's surrender. 1 year since President Ortega had laughed in the face of the Galactic Empire. Now a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen gathered. At the edge of Imperial space, 200 human warships formed the core of the armada. Their hulls were dark gray, designed to absorb light and sensor signals. Their weapons hummed with barely contained energy. Each one carried soldiers who had trained for this moment, who had dedicated their lives to this cause. But the humans were not alone. 37 species had joined the alliance. Kethri cruisers flew alongside human destroyers. DeLorean submarines had been converted into space-capable vessels, their elegant designs cutting through the void. Kreth mining barges, refitted with weapons, lumbered at the rear of the formation. Ships of every shape and size, crewed by beings of every type, all united under a single banner. Admiral Katie Morrison stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Defiance. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built, a kilometer-long vessel designed specifically for this campaign. Beside her, Mira served as liaison to the allied species, translating between dozens of languages and resolving the countless, small conflicts that arose when so many different cultures worked together. "The fleet is ready," Mira reported. "All ships have checked in. Morale is high." Morrison nodded. She looked at the screens surrounding her, showing the faces of captains and commanders from across the Alliance. Human and alien, predator and prey, oxygen breathers and silicon-based life forms. All of them watching her, all of them waiting. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. 1 year ago, the Vexari Dominion gave humanity a choice: kneel or die. They thought we would be like every other species they had conquered. They thought we would surrender. They thought wrong. Her voice carried to every ship in the fleet, translated instantly into 100 different languages. "We are Deathworlders. We crawled out of an ocean of acid. We survived ice ages and supervolcanoes and mass extinctions. We killed the predators that hunted us and tamed a world that tried to murder us every single day of our existence. And they thought they could frighten us with ships and plasma lances." On the Kethri cruiser Unity, young soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. On the DeLorean vessel Ocean's Memory, Veterans who remembered the old wars felt tears forming in their eyes. On 100 other ships, beings who had lived their entire lives under Imperial oppression felt something stirring in their hearts. Today we end the Vexery Dominion, Morrison continued. Not through cruelty, not through genocide, but by showing every species in this galaxy that they don't have to be afraid anymore. That freedom is possible. The tyrants can be beaten. She paused, looking at Mira, who nodded with fierce determination. For Earth, for Thesan Prime, for Deloran Kreth, and every world that has suffered under Imperial rule. Today, we fight. Today, we win. Today, the Deathworlders strike back. The communication channels exploded with cheers, roars, clicks, and sounds that human ears couldn't even hear. The fleet surged forward as one, entering hyperspace toward the Imperial capital, the Battle of Vexer. Prime would be remembered for 1,000 years. High Chancellor. Vexaman had gathered every remaining ship in the Empire to defend his homeworld. 2,000 warships formed a defensive sphere around the planet, their weapons charged and ready. It was still the largest military force in the galaxy. It was not enough. The Allied fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Morrison had spent months planning this attack, studying every possible scenario, preparing for every contingency. She knew the Imperial fleet was larger. She also knew that size wasn't everything. All ships, she commanded, execute Pattern Delta. The human vessels split into small groups, each one supported by ships from allied species. They attacked from multiple angles simultaneously, never giving the Imperial commanders a chance to concentrate their fire. The adaptive hull plating absorbed plasma lance strikes. The kinetic accelerators punched holes through shields and armor alike. The Kethri, trained by human instructors, fought with a ferocity their ancestors would have been proud of. The Delorians used their intimate knowledge of fluid dynamics to predict Imperial movements and intercept them perfectly. The Kreth, their silicon bodies, immune to many types of radiation, flew directly through the Imperial defensive fire to deliver devastating close-range attacks. For 3 days, ships exploded on both sides. Thousands of beings died in the cold darkness of space. Admiral Morrison barely slept, directing the fleet with an intensity that pushed her to the very limits of human endurance. On the 3rd day, the Imperial orbital defenses fell. Morrison refused to bombard the planet's surface. Instead, she broadcast a message to High Chancellor Vexamon directly. "The war is over," she said. "Your fleets are destroyed. Your empire is falling apart. Surrender now, and we will show mercy. Continue fighting, and I cannot guarantee the safety of your civilian population." For hours, there was no response. Then, finally, a shuttle rose from the planet's surface. Carrying the High Chancellor himself, Vexaman walked through the corridors of the Defiance like a creature in a nightmare. He had ruled the galaxy for 2 centuries. He had believed himself invincible. Now he was surrounded by beings he had considered less than animals. Beings who had somehow defeated everything he threw at them. The surrender was signed in the flagship's main conference room. Admiral Morrison stood on one side of the table. High Chancellor Vexamon stood on the other. Representatives from every allied species watched as the ancient Vexery placed his mark on the document. "Why?" Vexamon asked when it was done. His compound eyes were dim with exhaustion and despair. "You could destroy us. Enslave us, as we enslaved others. Why show mercy?" Morrison thought about the question carefully. She thought about all the humans who had died in this war. She thought about the colonies that had been bombarded, the families that had been torn apart, the lives that had been lost. "Because that's not who we are," she said finally. "We're Deathworlders, Chancellor. We know how hard survival is. We don't want to make it harder for anyone else, even for our enemies." Vexamon stared at her for a long moment. Then he lowered his head in a gesture that humans would later learn was the deepest form of Vexery respect. 6 months later, the Galactic Federation was established. Representatives from over 200 species gathered on a neutral station, debating the laws and structures that would govern their new society. Humanity was offered a leadership position. It's a permanent seat on the ruling council with extra voting rights. President Ortega declined. "We didn't fight this war to become the new empire," he told the assembly. "We fought for freedom, for equality, for the right of every species to determine their own destiny." He looked around the chamber, at all the different faces watching him. "We'll take our seat at this table. One seat, one vote. Same as everyone else." The assembly erupted in applause. Later that evening, Ortega stood at a window overlooking the station's observation deck. Stars stretched out before him, countless points of light representing worlds and civilizations that were now free. His aide joined him. "Are you proud of what we've accomplished, Mr. President?" Ortega considered the question. "Proud. We just did what humans have always done. We survived. We adapted. And when someone tried to push us around, we pushed back harder." He smiled slightly. "The galaxy thought we were primitives. They learned otherwise. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, exceeding expectations." On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Ships flew between the stars, carrying goods and people and ideas. Children grew up learning about the war and history classes, marveling at the courage of their ancestors, and in bars and trading posts across the galaxy, a new saying spread from world to world, species to species: "Never threaten a Deathworlder. They'll laugh at you, and then they'll make you regret it." The stars shone bright over 100 worlds, and everywhere beings looked up at them with new eyes. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was free, and humanity, the strange predator species from a death world called Earth, had shown them the way. Some things, it turned out, were worth fighting for, and some species, against all odds, were worth believing in. The Deathworlders had struck back, and the galaxy would never be the same.